I am Leslie Pantin Iquindelan, using the way we called ourselves in Cuba. I was born on September 8th, 1948, in Havana, Cuba. September 8th is an important date in Cuban history or Cuban folklore. It's the day of Our Lady of Charity, La Caridad del Cobre, the patroness of Cuba.
What was? Tell me a little bit about what those early years were like in Cuba, living in Havana.
Well, they were great. We had a very comfortable life. My father and my grandfather had a insurance business that one of the largest in Cuba. We lived in Miramar section of Cuba, of Havana. My grandparents lived across the street. I went to La Salle School, where my father had gone, but I went to the new school that was in the Miramar section, unlike my father that went to El Vedado. My family came in the Pantin side, came to Cuba from Trinidad and Tobago. They were British diplomats, and my ancestor got assigned to Havana as a consul, and he started a tobacco leaf cultivation growing business. And then after that, he started to insure those plantations, and slowly eased out of the tobacco business and into the insurance business. They started by insuring the tobacco plantings, and I remember as a kid going to the insurance office, where on top of the warehouse that used to store the cigar leaves. They had been out of the insurance business at that time for several decades, but still the building smelled like tobacco, and it was a great aroma. My grandparents and my parents had British passports when we came here, and we had a experience we got invited to meet the Queen of England aboard the royal yacht, the Britannia, that was anchored in the port of Miami, and it was exactly as you see on TV. The receiving line, Mr. and Mrs., they used the pronunciation name, the French pronunciation of her name, Mr. and Mrs. Pantin, and after the reception line, it was like any cocktail party, except that the drinks were pre-mixed. You had, of course, gin and tonic, scotch and water, scotch on the rock, period. At that time, I drank scotch and water, so it was great. So after the formal part, I got to talk to the Queen. And I go, Your Majesty, my grandparents went to your coronation. And she goes, from where? I go, Cuba. And she goes, Cuba? Like, how do those savages get into my coronation? And I explained the story I did, that they were in the diplomatic service of me. So that was a great experience. On my mother's side, King Delan, my family came from Ireland, and we're going to Ireland this summer to visit where we came from. They went from Ireland to Spain. At that time, talking about all the big issues nowadays about immigration, Spain welcomed people from Ireland to go to Spain, and the moment they got to Spain, they were awarded Spanish citizenship and encouraged to go into the army. My ancestor, Vicente Quindelan, came and was a officer in the Spanish, the Irish Brigade inside the Spanish Army. His son was also in the Army and got transferred to Florida to be the governor of East Florida. At that time, the state of Florida, where we are right now, was divided in two sections under, of course, the Spanish rule. West Florida in Pensacola as the capital, and East Florida in San Agustin as the capital. My ancestor was the governor. By the way, how Tallahassee, the capital, and the home of Florida State University, I'm going to talk in a while, how was it chosen? People came from San Agustin and Pensacola. They met in the middle. This is the capital. So, East Florida, with my ancestor, Sebastian King DeLand O'Regan, was the governor. The Treaty of Paris, they had an exchange. The British took over the city of Havana for 13 months. So they traded the city of Havana, the British gave it up for Florida, and the Spanish gave Florida. And that's how Florida became part of the British Empire, and then the United States. An interesting sideline, Florida was under Spanish rule for 400 and some years, still more time than that Florida has been part of England or part of the United States. My ancestor then got transferred to be the governor of Cuba, headquartered back then in Santiago de Cuba, and that's how we landed in Cuba. He was the great-great-grandfather of my mother, so I guess makes me great-great-great-grandson. And he stayed in Cuba. He had his family in Cuba and died in Cuba. So that's on the King DeLand side. And then in 1960, we came to United States. We were in Varadero Beach, like I was 11 years old, like we spent every summer, and my brother, that was 8. My sister was newborn. We were told, we're coming to the United States, we're coming to Miami. And we had come here several times as tourists, and we thought it was great. And since it was in late August, we go, oh, my brother and I, we might miss school this year, so that's another bonus. So on August 21st, 1960, we left, it was a normal in Pan American Airlines. We had tickets for the morning flight, and somebody squealed that we had money, and we were taking money away. So they stopped us, they checked us, they strip searched all of us in that famous, the fishbowl, La Pecera, where 100,000 Cubans have passed through that and been searched. And they unfortunately didn't find any money, but we missed the flight, and we left that night like nothing had happened. We were coming expecting to be here 6 weeks, like my father was in a similar situation in the 30s, and they did go back after 50 days. We have 30 bags, you know. We're leaving Cuba. Who cares about paying extra for baggage? It was in pesos. We had our bicycles. We had all the baby carriages and things for my sister. And for some reason, we also brought an electric fan. So we lived in Miami Beach, and I went to St. Patrick's, where my father had gone to school in the early 30s. He went to school with Desi Arnaz and Sonny Capone, the son of Al Capone. And they did go back in 6 weeks. We lived in the Venetian Causeway in Miami Beach and loved it. The school ended at 2:30, unlike in Cuba that we went to lunch at home and came back, and it was a whole day affair. After December, my father realized that this was not 6 weeks, and we moved to Coral Gables. People that had hard times coming from Cuba, or hard time was moving from Miami Beach to Coral Gables. But, it was not the same. It was, my father started to work in the insurance business. At that time, to have an insurance license, you had to be a United States citizen, so he was not. And my uncle Victor and him sold insurance with somebody else getting a cut of the commissions to the newly arrived Cuban exiles like ourselves that needed insurance, the very basic needs for their car. Probably few people had homes that they were owned for their rental apartment, and that's what we started the insurance business, and we started a life in the United States. I went to St. Teresa School here. When we got to St. Patrick's, they put me back a year, and then when I went to St. Teresa's, they put me back in my correct grade, and I graduated from St. Teresa's, went to Christopher Columbus School here in Miami, part of the Marist, and then I was far from being a good student, and we went to a school in Oklahoma, a Catholic school called St. Gregory's College, that the monks there told us that Shawnee, Oklahoma, where the school was the runner-up to the Air Force Academy to be the home of the Air Force Academy. The world goes around, and I go to the Air Force Academy, and I go to the museum, and I check Shawnee, Oklahoma, not the runner-up, not the third runner-up, not the fifth runner-up, nor the 10th runner-up. So the monks that used to come to Miami, because we had a lot of alums from St. Gregory's here, I asked them, how about the story about Shawnee becoming almost the home for the Air Force? Yeah. So you better check it out, because you're not even in the top 10. And the reason that we had, I think over the years, almost 100 Cubans went to St. Gregory's College. And how it started, the Cuban Refugee Center started to send students there. And then it followed by many years. We had a program called the Cuban Loan that was like the U.S. loan for American citizens. It gave you a loan of $1,000 a semester, and at St. Gregory's, that paid for room, board, tuition, food, everything, except going and coming to Shawnee, Oklahoma. It was a junior college, and then I transferred to Florida State University, where we were one of the very few Cubans that were in in Florida State, Tallahassee, which is 500 miles from Miami. At that time, parents didn't like to send their kids away to college, so and I got involved in the Florida State University organizations. At one time, I was in the Alumni Association, in the Boosters, which is the athletic fundraising, and in the FSU Foundation, which is with this academic fundraising. And I got a degree in insurance, risk and insurance, even though I did not want to follow my family in the insurance business, but I liked the courses, graduated, and started to work for Pantin Insurance. That worked for 17 years there, and then my father was one of the first Cubans here to get involved in the community. He was involved. He was in the board of the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce, the first Cuban, and in the Orange Bowl Committee, which is 90 years old this year, and he was in a group that all the members were Anglo males until then, and one year they brought in 4 people, a African American, a woman that was a widower, and a nun. And the philosophy behind was that a nun and a widower would not be hitting the man of the Orange Bowl Committee. And then my father was part of those 4 that he became the first Hispanic in the Orange Bowl Committee, and part of that. Years later, I followed the footsteps and became the first president. Again, the first non-Anglo male president of the Orange Bowl Committee, which, as I said, is still going around and very strong engine for our community. The Orange Bowl Committee was founded in the 30s as a bridge for tourists between the racing season at Hialeah Park and New Year's. There was a lull there that the hotels were empty, and that's why the Orange Bowl Committee was found. I am proud to say that my son is in the Orange Bowl Committee and on the board of directors. My father was asked by Luis Sabines, who was the president of Camacol, the Latin Chamber of Commerce, to find somebody to start a Kiwanis club. And they chose me, and I went and gathered and recruited 30, which was the minimum that you needed to get your charter, friends of mine from college, from high school, and we started the Kiwanis Club of Little Havana, but with a different twist to it. A lot of the clubs, a lot of the civic clubs, the main thing was to have lunch and to be a network to get business, which the Kiwanis Club of Little Havana is. But our members, we decided that we wanted to make a difference and be a very, very active club in Kiwanis International. That's all over the world. And the Kiwanis Club Little Havana was founded in 1975. It's going to be 50 years old next year. And we still have a lot of projects around Miami helping kids. Back to school, summer camps, basketball leagues, soccer leagues, getting supplies for and scholarships. We have given hundreds of scholarships to universities in Florida to our kids, and after 75 years, we're strong and still going on. And we are known worldwide for Carnival Miami and Calle Ocho. That started as a project to bring the community closer together. When we started Calle Ocho in 1978, all the work had to be done by the members. Putting the stage together, putting the porta toilets, the whole thing, but we had fun. We had, between working, we had celebrations, and I remember that the night before the first Calle Ocho in 78, we were having drinks at the Centro Vasco restaurant in Calle Ocho and going around the bar. What do you think, how many people you think will go tomorrow? And people go, 10,000, be great. We had hired the trolley cars that were in Lincoln Road at that time to help transport the people from 27th Avenue to 12th Avenue, long walk. And like an hour into the festival, we had to tell the people with the tram, go back to Lincoln Road, we have too many people. And the headline in the Miami Herald the next day was 100,000 people go to Calle Ocho. So with that, I started to, after I was the first president of the Kiwanis Club of Little Havana and co-chair of the Calle Ocho Festival, and I started to do work for the Kiwanis in promotion and marketing as a consultant. And through the years, I started to get out of the insurance business into the special events and public relations and marketing business, which is much, much more fun than insurance, and eventually formed the Pantin partnership that is, I had it for many, many years. My first client was the Grand Prix of Miami in downtown Miami. The first event was a hell of a rainstorm that made the event to be canceled because of rain. The streets were flooded. You could not race and flood the streets in downtown Miami, but I started to grow the business. I was 40 years old when I did it, and we have clients like McDonald's. We were the first agency in the whole McDonald's system to represent the whole market, English, Spanish, Creole, and I had the account for 30-some years, which is until McDonald's, and I was ready to retire around that time. And anyway, I had clients like Merrill Lynch, Ford, Univision, so it was a great business. And with that, one of our clients, AppMed, the health plan, told me, hey, you find us a Cuban event to sponsor. And I looked around and there was nothing that fitted what AppMed wanted at that time. So they told me, hey, why don't you start something? And I started Cuba Nostalgia, and picked the weekend of May 20th, 20 de Mayo, which is Cuban Independence Day. And I had the event for 18 years, and first in Coconut Grove, and then at the youth fair, very, very successful. And thank God I sold it right before the pandemic, and the people that bought it weren't able to have the event that year because of the pandemic. Then another client, Merrill Lynch, said, hey, we want to do an event that caters markets to the high-end Hispanics. in Miami, and then if it goes well, we'll do it in other markets. And they told me, they gave me the challenge, either a concert of classical Latin American music or an art fair. And I'm thinking about the second part, about being someplace else. And I go, we have a orchestra, and we have a concert in Carnegie Hall, and the violin guy breaks his arm. The piano person has a nervous attack, and I go, I don't think I want to do this. And but in Cuba Nostalgia, we have a section that was Cuban art. So I had an idea, and it was only an idea what a task would be to form. So we formed a art fair of art from Latin America called Merrill Lynch Art Americas that went for 12 years and was the first fair of art from Latin Americans in the United States. At that time, the fairs that we had in Miami, Art Miami had some Latin American art. Art Basel, who came in at the same time we started Merrill Lynch Art Americas, had absolutely zero art from Latin America. Here, now, 20 some years later, Art Miami is mainly Latin American art, and Art Basel has the best Latin American galleries in their business. So, it was very satisfying, and it was a great business. It was a great business. I had the privilege of being in 3 bank boards. The first bank board was First National Bank of Miami. That had a great name. That was the name that Southeast Bank had before it became Southeast Bank and got sold, and it was the largest bank. And so I was there for a while, and then after that, I got invited to be on the board of Barnett Bank. That was the largest bank in Florida that had 33 different banks in Florida, and I was on the board and in the loan committee, and I learned a lot about business. And then I was on one of the founders and in the board and vice chairman of Great Florida Bank. So from that, I got to learn a lot of experience to run my not only my PR business, but Cuba Nostalgia and Art Americas. Then I got involved kept involved, like I said, in the Orange Bowl, where I became president, and I had the national championship football game here, and now my son is part of that. And I got involved at Florida State University, which I had the great honor of being named by Governor Jeb Bush to the Board of Trustees. I had been Governor Lawton Childs named me to the board of Miami-Dade College, which, as everybody knows, is the best and largest public institution of higher learning in the United States. And then when I had been on the board of Barry University in Miami Shores, Catholic school. At one time, it was only for women. When I rotated off the board of Miami-Dade, Sister Jean O'Loughlin, who was the icon in this community, called me and she says, I want you to come back to Barry. You're going to be on the board, you're going to be the chair, and I'm going to retire under your watch. But sister, other people have been waiting. Don't worry about it. And exactly that happened. I became the chairman I was a chairman for 5 years of Barry University, and Sister Jean retired, and we were in a search that we hired another nun, Sister Linda, that was president of Barry. But then, like I said, Jeb Bush named me to the Florida State University board. I was the first Cuban Hispanic on the board. Today, out of 13 members statewide board, we have 3 Cuban Americans on the board of Florida State University, which is 500 miles from here. And 22% of our students are Hispanic. We're almost knocking there on 25% that it makes you the distinction of a Hispanic-friendly institution. And my son and my daughter graduated from Florida State, and a few nephews and nieces. And the very best thing to being a trustee of Florida State was giving the diploma to my son, and then to my daughter. When they graduated, they stopped the ceremony. I was wearing the academic robes. Gave me the diploma and a hug. So that was priceless.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I want to jump. It's such a full life and career. I want to kind of jump back into a couple of things. You didn't want to go into the insurance business. That was the I would call it a legacy business. Your grandfather was in it. Your father was in it, and you literally say, "No, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that." But somehow it sucked you in. You ended up. Tell me about that decision to kind of get in.
It was the courses that I took at Florida State, which by the way has one of the best insurance programs in the nation, public or private universities. I liked the courses that I took, and then I tried to get a job at another agency. And people, rightfully thought, so this guy is going to be here only a few years to learn the ropes, and he's going to go back to Pantin Insurance. So, I was there in the insurance business for 17 years, and slowly, as I got involved in the community, rotated into the PR business. My grandnephew is in the insurance business, working at what that used to be that agency. So,
You decided to sell after 17 years. You decided to sell Pantin. Is that what you made?
No. He kept going. My father was still active. My uncle, my cousin's husband, who he kept, and they sold it. And then my brother. And they kept until they sold it only a few years ago. I was long gone by the time they sold the agency to the largest insurance agency in Florida. So,
I want to talk. I'm kind of going to jump around a little bit because I think you did a great job of kind of giving us an overview of all the things you do. Calle Ocho starts. Calle Ocho is an iconic. All the things you've been involved with are iconic parts of the fabric of Miami. Calle Ocho starts. You're expecting 10,000. You get 100,000. What do you think was the? What do you think made that event so successful and so iconic for Miami?
Okay, first, let me give you how we planned this. I remember this was planned in a paper napkin, like a lot of things are planned, at the Red Coach Grill on Biscayne Boulevard. We were thinking, what do we do? We wanted to do an event for the rest of the community to get to know us. And we were partners with the Miami Herald, and I'll touch that in a minute. So when we were talking over lunch, so what do we do? Oh, let's do a bicycle race. But that's not like a uniting event. Let's do like a concert. But what do we do? what do we do with the concert? Is the music in English and Spanish, or what? And the race, bicycle race down Calle Ocho. Okay, so that's how we got to Calle Ocho. Then Willie Vermelho, an architect here, well known, who was the co-chair with me of Calle Ocho the first year, says, well, when I went for my master's at Penn in Philadelphia, we used to have neighborhoods that had ethnic festivals, and they had food, art, boxing, dance, and food and drinks. Well, let's do that. So we came up with the name Open House. We were something that was super interesting. We were very careful that in the first year, in the title, we have no Spanish words. Open House 8, an invitation to Little Havana was the name that we chose. And it was the Anglos who called it Calle Ocho, or Calle Ocho, in those years. And with the Herald, with the Miami Herald, they were starting El Nuevo Herald back then. We got a great push, and they, publicity and help with their PR department, which at that time it was like 10, 15 people in their communications department. And so the first festival happens, a great success. We had a deficit of $14,000. 7 for Kiwanis, that was all the money in the world. 7,000 for the Herald, Knight Ridder, that was the people at the PR department of the Herald have a heart attack. We can't afford that. And so I go, I'm gonna go to the publisher. And I went to the publisher, and the publisher wrote the check. And then they said, well, maybe next year we're not partners because we want other media to be involved, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then from the second year on, it's turned to be profitable. And that's how the Kiwanis Club of Little Havana fuels and all the other projects that we have that are very significant for our kids in our community.
How do you remember who the headliners were for that first year?
100,000 show up for Calle Ocho. I have it.
And were you involved with the concerts, the Carnival Miami concerts?
The Carnival, the process for Carnival Miami came. The tourist people, the Convention Bureau said, hey, that's a great tourist attraction, but a one-day festival is not enough. If you do something else, 2 weekends, we'll give you some seed money to start. And that's we started. And we started Carnival Miami. And we started with an event at the Orange Bowl Carnival Night that it was very, very controversial in the Kiwanis. You're going to kill another invention from Leslie. You're going to kill Calle Ocho. So the first time we did it, it was, we're going to do Calle Ocho first. That makes no sense. Then Carnival Night second, in case Carnival Night is a flop, Calle Ocho happens. So at that time, I was approached by Joaquin Blaya, who was the president of Univision. Well, went to be the Univision president. At that time, he was the general manager of Channel 23. And he says, I want to bring this show to Miami called Siempre en Domingo, always on Sunday. He's like the Ed Sullivan of Latin America. And I go, I have never heard of that, but I'll watch it this Sunday. So we had the show the first year from Calle Ocho, not from from the Orange Bowl with Julio Iglesias and all the stars in the Spanish language world, and it became, then we switched and we put we moved to the Orange Bowl, and then we put Calle Ocho at the end to end the Carnival Miami, and then we did events between the 2 weekends for what the Convention Bureau has, a cooking contest, Miss Carnival Miami, 8K race. The 8K race, we go to the people that sanction racing events, and they go, oh, we don't have a 8K. We have 10Ks, and we have, listen, we don't care. This is not to win an Olympic medal. We want 8K, Calle Ocho 8K. You know, luckily enough, shorter distance, 8K is close to 5 kilometers became, and that was a great event that a race through all of Little Havana, from downtown to Little Havana, and it's still Carnival Miami, and all the events are still, we had a golf tournament, stuff to fill in the weekends.
1 second. Okay, go ahead.
And the Kiwanis Club, one of the things that I'm super proud, because one of the things that we need to do at FACE is to keep our Cuban heritage for our kids. And like my son got involved in Florida State University, where he's on the board of the National Booster Board and the Orange Bowl. My daughter was involved, and she was a member of the Kiwanis Club of Little Havana. So, you know, and this is, you know, it was done naturally without forcing them to do anything. So, you know, one of the duties that we have is to keep our heritage alive, so people know what the Cuba, you know, that does not exist nowadays is.
As somebody who grew up with partially British background, did that also feel part of your heritage? Do you feel like the connection to British history and culture?
It is part of but my father and my uncle spoke British English perfect. As you can see, I have a Cuban accent. And then my father and uncle were they had a British governess that taught perfect English. And then when my son and my brother and I were growing up, she, you know, having a governess that went out of business, thank God. We had lessons from her, Miss Cox, you know, once a week. And, you know, my son and I, my brother and I, we used to tell our parents, listen, this English that Miss Cox is trying to teach you is different than what we learn at school every day. We had, in Cuba, we had English every day. So, and the best thing about the British heritage was to, you know, to meet the Queen. And
what year was that?
I don't know. I have all that stuff at home, and the Queen. Back to the Queen. She goes, by the way, Your Majesty, we have a lot of the porcelain that my grandparents bought when they went to your coronation, and she knew what the Cuban situation was, and how were you able to take that out? And I go, another story, my grandparents had a butler. When that went, like having a governess went out of vogue, he went to work for Bacardi at the airport. So he had all the connections at the airport. So we would send duffel bags with towels and bed sheets and all that, and inside that we would put the porcelain or silverware old silver trays. That, by the way, most of the silver trays that we have were from the British insurance company, saying 50 years of Leslie Pantin and Sons, which was the name of our insurance business in Cuba, a British name that we had. So, I keep between the British, Irish, Spanish, French, because Pantin was French, and when we got to the receiving line at the Britannia, they pronounced Mr. and Mrs. Pantin. Okay, I never used that, but anyway, so we have I have a set of flags that starts with Ireland on one side, France on the other side, British, Trinidad Tobago, Cuba, American. The other flags are Irish, Spanish, Cuban, United States.
You tell me a little bit. One of the things that I noticed that you did is in 1978. I have it here that you decided to run for the Florida House of Representatives. So can you tell me about that decision to run for the House and what was that campaign like?
That was in 1978. I ran for the Florida House of Representatives. We had zero representatives in Tallahassee. Out of 160, 120 in the Florida House, 40 in the Senate, zero. So that was an incentive to run for that. It was a great experience. I lost the race, but I won. My wife, Martha, who worked in the campaign, and we've been married for 30-some years and have 2 great kids and 2 great granddaughters. I got like vindicated a couple years later when a great candidate. Okay, one thing, there were multi-member districts. Nobody has heard of that. To keep minorities out from being elected, you had, for example, the district that I run, you had 3 different seats, 3 different members of the House of Representatives, but the district geographical area was huge, so there would be no group that could send their representatives there. It was all of Miami Beach, all of the city of Miami, Key Biscayne, all of Coral Gables, South Miami, West Miami. There were 3 persons in the race. One was Larry Plummer, whose father used to be a school board member, and his brother was in the City Commission of Miami and was in the City Commission for something like 30 years, and an African American, Marvin Dunn, who's the president, who is now an educator at FIU and doing a lot of African American heritage. So I got vindicated two years later, because the Plummer name was so powerful. A African American with the name of Plummer runs against Alan Rosenthal, who was Anglo and Jewish, and his father was the president of one of the biggest banks here in Miami. And they run the Plummer without ever showing his face, without having one picture of him. So nobody knew that he was African American or anything like that. He gets elected on the Plummer name solely, and he goes to Tallahassee, and everybody there is excited that they have a black Republican elected from Dade County, and so they interview him after he's elected the first time. "Sir, what do you think about, being elected to the Florida House of Representatives?" He goes, "It's great. He pays $12,000, and I'm a bus driver, and I make $5,000. So it's a huge raise. So that shows, in a story how powerful the name was. After that, I decided that, I was not going to run anymore and still be involved in the periphery of politics. And
periphery was enough. Periphery was enough. You didn't need to be involved in anywhere. One race was enough for you, right? Tell me a little bit. One of the interesting notes I have in my question is I see that your mom became a citizen. She was naturalized at a ceremony at Ellis Island, and that I wonder what the impact of that was for your family and the sense of identity.
That was terrific. I got a call from Lula Rodriguez, the assistant to then Governor Bob Graham. Says, "Is your mother applying to be a citizen?" So it could be, because she's not. And she was always afraid of taking the test, even though she went several years to school in the United States and spoke good English. She said she was always worried that she got Howard Johnson confused with Lyndon Johnson when she had to take the test. Well, so let me call her. "Mom, are you gonna?" "Yeah, I'm gonna be a citizen. I apply." I said, "Okay." So I go, "Governor Graham is inviting you, one of two citizens in the whole state of Florida, to be sworn in at Ellis Island with, the 100th anniversary of the Statue of Liberty that's been just renewed, has been renovated." So, and they say, and I get invited, but I don't get to go to the ceremony. So we went. We stayed in New Jersey. There was a bus that picked her up, and the person swearing in was Warren Burger, the Chief Justice of the United States of America, and the speaker was Ronald Reagan, the President of the United States. So it was fantastic and a great honor. Next day, going back to Miami, I picked up a New York Times, and I go, let's see how the New York Times covered this. And there in the front page is Mikhail Baryshnikov, and my mother sitting right behind him, and her face was super clear there. "You know who was in front of you? The fame?" "Oh no, I didn't even know who he was." So it was a heck of an experience to have that honor, for our family.
I also want to. You talked about so many of the events that you were involved in, and there's two that, in particular, that we didn't talk about that I want to talk about. And I'm being mindful of our time. One was the papal visit, and the other one was the Summit of the Americas. And so let's start with the papal visit. Can you tell me about that and how you got involved?
The papal visit, I was asked to be in part of the organizing committee. Alba Chapman, then the president of the Miami Herald, was the chairman. And so we had many, many meetings, and it was interesting because I wanted the parade where the Pope would go in the streets of Miami to go naturally down Calle Ocho, but the organizers, from the Vatican, were kind of worried of playing up to the Cubans here and get in trouble with their priests and nuns, whatever few were left in Cuba. No, we're going to go through Biscayne Boulevard. And then they had all this thing about shutting the TV, welding the manholes together in case of, so very few people went to the parade in Biscayne Boulevard. But the mass in at FIU that was fantastic, and under a rainstorm, and then the Pope came in the Pope mobile through the crowd, and in the crowd, all the flags were Cuban flags, and you can hear the Pope saying, "Cuba, Cuba, Cuba," all the Cubans here. So it was a great experience. Got soaked, but it was worth it.
Amazing. And tell me about the Summit of the Americas.
The Summit of the America was a great event here, where the presidents of the democratic countries in Latin America came here. It was at the Biltmore. I got to meet President Clinton and Hillary, and a lot of the presidents and top officials from Latin America, with a chance to talk to them face to face about the situation in Cuba. So that was another fantastic event. Another event that I did was I was the chair of Miss Universe. That Miss Universe back then used to be one of the top events on TV. This was after we got horrible reputation here in Miami. The cover of Time magazine, Paradise Lost, and we needed to get some good publicity for Miami. So for a few years we did Miss Universe, Miss USA, Teen USA, and I was the chair of the host committee. That was a fantastic experience also.
I wonder if you could tell me, I mean, you're involved in so many events, and obviously that transition from insurance, which was not as fun, as you say, into events and publicity. What were the strategies that you used when you took on creating these events and tackling kind of publicity campaigns?
Well, in all those events, my goal as a businessman was that we would have all the expenses covered by sponsors. So in Cuba Nostalgia, in Calle Ocho, in Carnaval Miami, in Art Americas, we had everything covered before we opened our doors. So if only one person went and paid $12, we made $12, but we never lose money. So in all the events that I did, I follow that philosophy, that it was great to have a special event like Calle Ocho, Art Americas, or whatever, but make sure we don't lose money as an organization at the Kiwanis Colorado Havana, or as a business person with Cuba Nostalgia and Art Americas that were businesses for me.
A lot of these events are, what I think we would probably consider, a lot of these events that you're involved with would consider iconic Miami events, but also iconic events for the Cuban community. How has the Cuban community and how has Miami changed since you were involved with these?
Well, the best place to see that is at Cuba Nostalgia. When we started, 20 years ago, there were a lot of people with nostalgic about Cuba. And you go there, especially on a Sunday, and you were three, sometimes 4 generations wearing guayaberas like mine, showing them around what Cuba used to be. One of the most popular things that we had was the map of Havana and Santiago on the floor, and you see people there sometimes crying, saying, our family used to live here, and the school was here. So as the years have passed, some of the people that now attend Cuba Nostalgia are the people that were born and grew up in the revolution and get to know and learn about what Cuba was before the revolution, and we had a wall there on superlatives that Cuba had, and people that grew up during the revolution that none of that stuff was told, that Cuba was had one of the most progressive countries in Latin America. The labor laws that Cuba had were even better than the ones that the United States had at that time. We had more phones per person than any country in Latin America. We had more televisions than any country in Latin America. We had color TV in Havana before Miami had color TV. People ask me how about the cultural shock of coming from Cuba to the United States, and I go, no, we grew up watching Highway Patrol and all these shows, and in our case and the case of the first waves of exiles was not culture, it was an economic impact that we had to start all over. When I said our parents had to start over, my parents came in their 30s, in the prime of their lives, and they had to start over again. So, and I started working when I was 13, delivering the Miami News and then the Miami Herald, and did not stop working for 62 years until I retired. So that.
Yeah, it's a lot. I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about, facts about Cuban exiles. And this interview that we're doing is going to live in a repository so that people, generations from now, can go back and hear from your mouth and other Cuban leaders about their experiences. But I wonder if you could tell me, what is one thing you want people to know about the Cuban community, the Cuban exile community?
The Cuban exile community, well, one of the reasons that FACE got founded, we had excellent reputation across the United States about entrepreneurs, about business people, about fun people. By the way, I think that some of that image was created by, believe it or not, Desi Arnaz and I Love Lucy show, that the Cubans were portrayed on TV. I Love Lucy was one of the top, if not the top, TV shows for years, and it got showed a Cuban in a setting, a professional, in a good apartment where they live, having a beautiful American wife. That helped us, our reputation, and the success that we had here in Miami and in New Jersey and other parts of the United States, help. We had a great reputation. Then with the Mariel boat lift, that reputation took a hit. Fidel Castro did it with every purpose to damage our reputation, and FACE was created to be like an anti-defamation society to right that wrong that was made. And we had events back then after the Mariel, and now it's the like anti-defamation league for the Cuban Americans.
Yeah, no, it's very important to be able to kind of correct those wrongs. As we're just out of time now, one question that I've been asking everyone, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What does the American dream mean?
We lived the American dream. We came here, and again, when we came, we did not come. We came for more than $5. Okay, and again, like I said, we thought we were staying for 6 weeks, as my father and my uncle and my grandparents had done. So, we were able to to start the insurance business, and so many, I guess, millions of Cubans that come to the United States have to, restart. Many came with zero money, that have built great businesses. Some people came without their parents. Some of the people that you're going to interview were Pedro Pan. That's something that we haven't told enough. Pedro Pan, like Peter Pan, the character that flew, 14,000 kids came without their parents. At the age of 13, 14, 15, I was that age when those kids came, and they're thinking, what have I done that my parents had forsaken me? And they had sent me here to a country that I don't speak the language. Remember, many of the kids that came in Pedro Pan were sent to different places in the United States of America. Nebraska, and some of them, most of them had great experience. There's people like Armando Codina and Senator Martinez, Mel Martinez, U.S. Senator, that say, I have two families. I have my blood family, and I have the family that adopted me in Orlando or Jacksonville or what have you, that take great care of me. And then there are super successful people nowadays, the United States Senator, a great developer like Armando, but some people did not have a good experience, okay? And, combine that with the age and being in a new country, but many of them, most of them, were able to learn from that and work hard, get educated, and live the American dream that we lived. There's no other place better in the United States than Miami to show that the American dream is still alive and very well.